Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another mod stream. Hope you guys are doing well. No content plug today because I just did a mod stream yesterday. So I guess besides the fraud stream VOD, which you guys can check out on this channel, there's nothing to plug. It's Fraud Strike 21 Nov 2020. Some pretty funny moments in here. I would check them out. Tag them in the comments. I'll try to do that more often. But that's it. So, what are we doing today? So, I'd like to make these changes. What else would I have to do? Lurker, work weapon. Sup by Queer. Simulacrums will create copies of itself with scoring kills when it turns into uncontrollable wave of death. So that is a concern, right? I guess I can start adding some of these ideas here. Bar guest, revise passive, increase range for all nearby allied bar guest. And then simulacrum, vassal, move, revise stats, make it individually less strong. New passive, remove old passive. Creates a copy after killing a unit. New passive provides on death grants movement speed and attack speed bonuses. Not sure if it should be allied or not. I'll put that there for now. Revert mineral cost buff. I think that's pretty much it. Well, we already disabled the shaman's weapon during administer medstims in the past, so I figured we could just reuse the code for that. Simulacrums will have broodling stats. I don't think so. Simulacrums will create copies of itself when scoring kills when it turns an uncontrollable wave of death. So that's like the main concern. So for those of you who haven't been following the Discord server conversations, that is something that we've been thinking about, is how to improve the overall strength of the identity, basically, of the robotic units, because a lot of them feel a little weird. And then revise weapon, increase range. Question mark? Yeah. So I want to remove RNG, pseudo RNG. Clear affected targets on missile return, reduce attack speed. So the concern that I would have in general is essentially, will simulacrums end up being too powerful? I guess broodlings already create more broodlings on death, but it's, or on kill rather. So maybe I shouldn't be making it the same. I'm wondering if maybe we can make it a bit less like pseudo, not really pseudo random. Like I would say, if you consider the idea of the simulacrum creating a copy of itself after it deals a certain amount of damage, or after it attacks a certain number of times. Like maybe it should be attacked a certain number of times in a certain amount of time? Or must remain in combat for a certain amount of time, or something like that. Simulacrums are very rarely going to get kills, so what I want to do is I want to take it away from. I actually want to remove all things that are associated with doing things when a unit kills another unit. I want it to, I mean, like, the Cyclops might feel okay because it has a decent amount of base damage, so it doesn't feel as random in that situation, and you're going to be using a lot of Cyclopses generally. But for something like Broodlings, I think instead it should apply a debuff, and if that unit dies while that debuff is active, you know, that's when you have that's when you have a situation where the unit will provide Broodlings on death. I think that's probably better. And then we can just have the debuff expire after like 5 seconds or something, so, or whatever the time. I think what you're talking about with Gaska is how he would apply every certain number of attacks. He would apply a different. He would apply the stun or something. So he needed to charge his attack up, basically. I would say for the simulacrums, remaining in combat for a certain amount of time might be enough. The problem is deciding what counts as being in combat and having some sort of read that basically increases in visual potency the longer the unit remains in combat, but gets removed. Like the overlay would just get removed after the unit stopped being in combat. And so if the unit has to be in combat with like 5 or 10 seconds or whatever the time has to be, then I think that can, in theory, work. Now, the main concern is if we just say it needs to be in combat, does it count to be in combat if you attack your own units or an ally's units? In which case, you could just farm additional simulacrums off of that, right? It's not really veterancy. I don't even know. I mean, you can just test this oh, no, I guess you can't test that because of it's only affecting simulacrums. But I imagine they'll be quite fast. Because you said that max stack simulacrums were, like, faster than vultures or something. Terran units probably aren't too strong, but some elements of rushing them feel really strong. So I think in the early game they're disproportionately powerful. But I also think that there's not too many options for... It feels like sometimes there are too few options to counter them, but I also think you just need to be able to scout them. And if you know that they're going to go for like a heavy Wraith setup, especially with the revision that Wraiths have received recently, which I haven't played around with too much, I think you can just counter them with a decent number of units. Like you can rush to idols in robotics. I think vassals do okay with them, against them rather. Although they are gonna fall. If there's swarms of them, Wraiths will definitely win. Yeah, I actually initially thought the Penumbra would be built by the SCV and or the Mason. Which might still be the case, but we'll see. I've stopped myself from even looking at implementing new units because we need to rework eggs to get more unit IDs. So I haven't really thought too much about adding more units. Even some of the ones that are in the doc or in the on the website is like not implemented yet. Those ones still are not in a position to really be done in the same way, I don't think. Anyway, once I'm done with some conceptual stuff and hopefully we can get some things done. Yeah, we need the AI to be able to use additional worker types. Otherwise, it's just not worth looking into as a mechanic. Unless it's like a Mapcrap thing where only you can use them. But even then, it feels really dumb, you know? I think what I think will happen is actually that, at least for HYDRA, there's going to be... the fuck? Hold on, me. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. Anyway, what I think will happen is that we'll have a mid-tier worker that's better at harvesting or better at, like, basically we'll have two specialized workers. And the specialized workers will be better at different things. So there will be one worker that's better at, for example, resource harvesting, and then there will be another worker that's better at constructing stuff. Or so, you know, maybe there will be a worker that's better at harvesting resources in one way, so it gives you more yield, and also builds structures faster. And then there will be another worker that builds higher tier things, like maybe exclusively builds higher tier structures, but also when they harvest resources, they can maybe they return them faster somehow, or maybe they harvest resources without interrupting the resource regeneration or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, in theory, I could imagine there could be something like that where we have different strengths to the workers. So if you just want, you know, your everyman workhorse is going to be your default worker. And then there's going to be a worker that's like better for economy in some ways or better for production in some ways or whatever. And then there's going to be one worker that's better for tech, like builds higher tier things. Something like that. Yeah, they could grasp units. Yeah, I think it's good to have parity across all of the workers, which means you have workers that are relatively similar to each other. But I also think that it's fine. Like, so the default worker should probably be somewhat similar. We have custom construction mechanics for all of these different races. And that's about it as far as differences go. Like, obviously, SCVs are tankier than the other races' workers. And some, like, drones are a little bit better at actually attacking units than the other races. But those are where the similarities, or those are where the differences actually end. Whereas I think we can have very different approaches. Like, I've come up with an idea for I think it's the Gosvaleth, If we take a look at that in here. Yeah, the Gosvaleth is going to be an advanced worker that what I think about them is that they'll probably be able to. So I think they'll reduce their own HP by a certain threshold, say like 1/3 of their health every time they build a structure. So you can warp in almost like similar to Protoss. You can order to construct multiple structures with the same worker, basically. That's one of the ideas that I had. And if you cancel it, you won't get a drone back. You only get the Gosvaleth back if it's the last structure. Like if they're below 1/3 of their HP or whatever, like 1/4 of their whatever the HP threshold is. If they're below that, that's when the unit is consumed like a normal drone is. And then if you cancel that one, that's the one that you'll get back. So it'll be a little complicated code base wise, but yeah, I actually had I decided it would be better if it was Gosvaleth in terms of pronounceability, because Govzaleth is pretty fucking arcane. So I decided against it. I think taking control of enemy units that way is probably a dangerous precedent. It would feel really frustrating if your unit just gets picked up by an enemy transport. I think that was one of the main issues with, for example, the Viper, the Zerg unit in Starcraft 2 that can just yank enemy units. It feels so fucking annoying to have your positioning just get fucked by some unit that can just walk up and start pulling units around. What I would like to see instead is a unit that can pull allies over to it. So if the Viper was tankier or faster moving or something, and you could navigate them into enemy areas and pull other units in with them, that would be more interesting. That would be like healthier. It wouldn't be as toxic of a gameplay interaction where you're just like getting everything invalidated by a point and click ability. But it would be a harassment tool, or it would allow you to relocate certain units. Like if your Ultralisk is getting slowed by Marauders or whatever the fuck, because we're forced to use StarCraft 2 game stat as an example of this. Like that would be a situation where you could pull the Ultralisk out for safety reasons or something, you know? Obviously, they'd be a great support unit in team games where you could like relocate your allies' sieged tanks or something like that. Like that's a unit that I would actually like to see added to HYDRA. I would actually like that as a unit. Maybe it would be a Protoss unit or a Zerg unit, but a unit that can relocate allies sort of dynamically as they move around. I think that could be really cool. And the reason why it's better for an ally thing is that there's some element of cooperation and coordination there, and you're using it to try to get an advantage positionally by moving your own units. It's contingent on your own units being in a good position to capitalize on things, as opposed to just fucking with your ally, you know what I mean? What's up, Adam? Infestors are pretty toxic as well, yeah. They have that really insane. I guess they made it a projectile at some point instead of hit scan, point and click. But the fact that you can still just like immobilize your enemy's army for a solid amount of time, pretty consistently, and of course you throw it out on there once, it becomes so much easier to throw it on there again. So if you've got like multiple infestors or just one infestor with a lot of energy, you just smack it in there. Pretty embarrassing. Yeah, Hercs were essentially they seemed to just be a hard counter to Banelings to Butter, because they had that like reduced damage from Butter specifically, like reduced acid damage or something. But I think the only thing it actually reduced was Banelings, maybe Roaches as well or something. Or maybe it was reducing splash damage. I forget what it was, but they were. It was a very insanely specific hard counter. I don't think I ever saw Alpha Infestors, but I do remember hearing about their earlier edition of Queens, where the queen would evolve with the main hive cluster or whatever. So it was like a mobile nerve center type thing that would give you certain tech options or something. I think that's an interesting idea for maybe another faction somewhere down the line. Um, like another race in our own RTS, we might tap into an idea about a mobile nerve center, a mobile tech structure, basically like a tech unit, basically instead of a tech structure. I think that might be more interesting. Yeah. I think there's a lot of potential to experiment with stuff like that, but you need to know what you're doing, and you need to be open to reverting and revising and doing all this other shit. So. How do night elves refer to this? Refer back to this? Mongolith cocoon. I have to agree with that. Toxic creep. XT. Well, we were talking about a unit, not a structure. Like the Alpha SC2 Queen was a literal unit that moved around, had an attack. I think, obviously had all those ridiculous abilities. I actually think that if the Zerg had moved further with the mobile structure, like what do you call it? If they actually moved closer or moved further along and invested more time and I mean, anything Blizzard does is always a disaster, so you can't really say it was going to be good or promising. But I think there is something about having mobile structures that people probably don't bother exploring. I mean, Terrans have liftoff, but it's only on specific structures, which I guess is okay in some cases. I would actually like to revisit liftoff in a different way. But with what do you call it? Um, with mobile structures being able to uproot and move around, similar to night elves, I guess. Like I don't see why it has to be limited to specific structures, basically. Like I'll put it to you this way: I don't think Terran would be more overpowered if they could lift off every single structure they owned. I think supply structures would have to not provide supply while in transit. Because then you could just like stack them in a corner or whatever. That's probably the only thing that would be a concern. But aside from that, like I don't see why it has to be a gimmick, you know what I mean? Anyway, Iquare, can you check your DMs to let me know what we're doing today as far as HYDRA work goes, if you're able to do anything? Or interested? Yeah, well, you know I want to do crazy shit like having those tactical platforms that you can just put units on. So obviously I am of a different mind than a lot of other people. But let's check this out. So I didn't actually edit my Mapcrap map at all since I finished my stream the other day. But we have a pretty solid basis for the bottom left hand. Like pretty much the whole bottom strip I think is nice. I should be able to finish the player area as well as continue developing the top strip over here. I think there will be a base over here, base up here, a base over here, and then like one or two bases over there in the top right corner, base down here. I'm not sure about the players' team. This is going to be kind of similar to my third map in my full toilet submission, where there's multiple, like you're sort of surrounded on all sides. So I'm interested to see how it goes. We ought to give him another mineral field somewhere. Oh, it's not a war crap, huh? That'll be cool to see more Overlord stuff, though. Not sure if it, like, I like the idea of having bases that are really nice, that demand to be fought over because of the resources they provide, but I don't know about the wisdom of providing essentially like multiple of those. To same player. You got 10 mineral fields over here, and you got how many? 11 over here and 2 gas. And there's really only, like, it's a very top-heavy base in terms of trying to infiltrate. I guess the way we fix that is actually by extending this outward. Something like... Yeah, there's no way I'm getting away with that one. I was thinking of, like, not only just putting a ramp here, but also having something that blocks the access of this player from easily, like, intercepting units. Right? Because we don't want them to just be able to block it off entirely. Oh, I guess we can naturally throw a base over there if we wanted to as well. Okay, thanks for the exemplar change. I'll check it out. I think a lot of campaigns would have been better if they had the HYDRA game state because of the number of options that you have in HYDRA compared to vanilla. But it's a hard thing to say because so many campaigns disable certain tech. There's very few campaigns that allow you to have full tech or anywhere close to full tech. And even in the campaigns that do give you a lot of options for tech, even using the vanilla game state, you still then have a lot of scenarios where while you technically can use certain compositions, they're not really viable because of the nature of certain issues, like the game state or map state being such that it doesn't allow you to do anything but use air units, or doesn't allow you to use air units. So that would be something that I think is pretty frustrating. I forgot if we actually made the... Okay, it looks like the toggles are instant, which is nice. Cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think there's just so many more options that it's hard to imagine it being worse, if you know what I mean. Which probably sounds like I'm tooting my own horn or whatever, but I just think HYDRA gives you more interesting decisions that you can make as a player compared to the stuff that we see otherwise. But I don't even think that's necessarily like a reflection of the game state itself. It's more a reflection of the importance of providing choices and options to the player. You know what I mean? Like, it's not... I don't think it would be better purely because it's the HYDRA game state, as opposed to some other custom game state with a ton of options. Like, I think if... it's a weird idea to have because it has Zerg and Protoss in it. But if Zerg expansion used the Overlord tech tree, you know, that would also be something positive, if you know what I mean. Because there's more options in Overlord compared to the default game. So... The new engine we're planning on writing will also be sprite-based. Yeah, it's going to be 2D. That's because I am ideologically opposed to 3D for a lot of reasons, one of which being readability. I have a lot of readability concerns with 3D games. Another of which, it's like essentially opting into a bunch of overhead from a design standpoint, which you are never going to interact with or use to its fullest potential. So we're not planning on having a game state that involves things like multiple height elevations for air units, or having projectiles that deal different damage based on how far up they are in the sky, or anything like that. We're not going to plan on having walls block projectiles or anything that you would actually need 100% of the time to have, like, essentially things that you cannot do in 2D. There's nothing that we're planning on doing in a 2D game that would be really difficult because the game is 2D. So there's no reason for us to opt into 3D in the first place, right? And I think you need a reason to opt into 3D because it's so much more complicated, it's so much more demanding, and performance and readability concerns are out the wazoo for a 3D game compared to a 2D game. I also think that this is something you can just sort of eye test. The quality or caliber of art that you see in a 3D game is usually something that ages much worse compared to a 2D game. Like, Starcraft still is readable, and you can still understand what's going on. In the 1.16.1 pre-remastered stages, before they fucked everything up, you can still look at the game, and while its graphics are clearly dated, they're not objectively bad compared to what we have in 2D games now. Now, certainly they could be better. I'm not saying that they're like a gold standard, but they're relatively consistent. And then we look over to 3D games that were released even 5 years ago, even released now, and they already look like they came out 10 years ago. They already look like they're super dated because a lot of people don't really leverage they don't understand the limitations, and they don't leverage the benefits of going into a 3D workspace, in my opinion. Based on that's what I'm reverse engineering. It might also be that they just don't care, which is also not a good thing. But that's essentially where I'm at there. So there's a lot of reasons to avoid 3D, and not really any reason that I can think of to actually go for 3D, besides some very niche things like, for example, there's easy animations compared to 2D stuff where you can simply interpolate between multiple animations. You don't need to, in a sense, hard code all animations such that they are transitioning from standing to walking, for example, or going from walking to attacking instead of walking to standing, or standing to attacking instead of standing to walking, or something like that. Like, you don't have to worry about stuff like that as much in a 3D game. That's pretty much like the only thing that comes to mind off the top of my head after thinking about this for a little while now, since I read your question initially. Like, that's pretty much it, you know? So, say what you will about 3D games, but I haven't seen anyone that looked good, and I haven't seen a 3D RTS that was readable. And so, not to say that it can't happen, but I'm not necessarily trusting myself to completely go against buck all the trends and reinvent the wheel in that respect. I don't think that would be appropriate for me to try to do. As far as how much of the game feel I'm planning on carrying over from Brood War, I would say initially our goal is to recreate something that feels like Brood War from a gameplay sense, but is better in every way that it can be better. And those ways are legion. For example, we're going to have things like we're going to have improved pathfinding, which is obviously a bit of a touchy subject, especially in the Brood War community, of all communities. And I think one of the things that we're going to have that's an advantage there is we're essentially going to be making the individual unit AI not even really smarter, but just like I look at the Brood War pathfinding in some cases as just a literal series of bugs. Like, I don't even think it's a situation where the pathfinding is artfully, tastefully done in a different manner or whatever. You know what I mean? So I know that's, again, probably not a common thought process, but I would look at it like a bug that units don't realize, hey, we should probably not, we probably shouldn't be trying to find a different path around a unit because this unit is already accelerating, like they're moving. So why would I path around them when I could just wait in line for my turn and then path forward? Like, there's some obvious logical errors in the code, basically. So time will tell if we're successful in doing something better than that. But yeah, our initial goal is just to get HYDRA operational in a new engine. And obviously HYDRA is based on Starcraft in terms of the races and the game state and stuff. Obviously a lot of things will evolve exponentially from there because we won't be limited technically. But that's essentially the main goal initially. Yeah, Exigo was definitely the best 3D RTS game. Just full stop. I don't even think necessarily for readability, but it's the best 3D RTS game that I've ever played. And even it had a lot of problems. So it's not an easy determination to make. Like it's not obvious to me that 3D is the way to go, to put it that way. But as to what you're saying, Ike, where you feel like you've sacrificed many options for the ability to have multiple factions, I mean, that's another thing that you can just iterate on over time. So I don't know that it's necessarily a huge issue, if that makes any sense. Like, I guess if you assume that it's always going to be the way it is or whatever, then I can see why that would be a concern. But we all have at this point learned that readability is iteration rather is the key to victory. Sandy Sunken Pit looks like something out of another RTS game. A worse RTS game. At least these north-facing cliffs do. It's a super ugly terrain tile, in my opinion. Can't imagine trying to work with that. So both of these bases are subject to getting destroyed by somebody flanking up into these high ground areas, which I think adds a nice level of different counterplay and like positional value or whatever. We'll see how it actually works out at the end of the day. I'm gonna see if I have stacked compound. I feel like I do, but I might have been misremembering. Because I think when I was working on Tar Pit Tunnel or something, I had the idea of having that, but I'm not finding it in here, so... Yeah, I think we'll have to change that up a little bit. Just to shrink up the build space in some of these areas. I guess I'll have to modify the tile set real quick. Make the compound doodads buildable. Not sure why they're not, honestly. Okay. Wait. This happened in the ice tile set as well, so if this is also the case here, I really have a boner to pick with lard. This is actually unbelievable. I mean, not that it matters for this map, but the fact that Blizzard actually fucked up, and these are the same... Oops. These are the same megatile IDs. Like, holy shit. Blizzard fucked it up so bad that they actually just have the same megatile IDs, so that if you go into this tile set and you place a high compound ramp, it has the height flags of a low compound ramp. Nice. Fucking nice, dude. Thanks, Blizzard. I mean, thankfully, I'm not going to be using any high compound. At least not the Blizzard tiles. But that is actually astonishingly stupid. Yeah. What's up, Mutas Doesn't? You came in at the right time to hear me rant. Fucking so insane. Cannot believe. I mean, unfortunately, I can believe, but you know how it goes. It does? I don't recall ever seeing that. Hold on. Oh, I should open it in default. Where does it have null tiles? I mean, it has all these Zerglings, which is pretty epic. Is it in the other version? Would be funny if it was in this version. I don't see any null tiles anywhere. I don't know, man. Fake news, IMO. I think the top strip's coming along. alternate. That maybe that's a map grab. Starcraft. Yeah, I know it's not legal on Twitch to suck my own dick live on stream, but I do think that this layout is coming along. Pretty happy with how it's shaping up. Gonna add another base down here, and then I'm gonna move on to working on the players' side of things. Yeah, I don't have any other Blizzard game installed. And I'm not really interested in playing any other RTS game anyway, so. I guess if people wanted to make a CS:GO map or something. But even then I don't see, like, it's not a single player experience, right? So I don't really see how you would have the same thing. But we'll see what happens. I might be starting to mod some Counter-Strike stuff at some point. Apparently the process is a little bit less stupid than I thought it was, but it really hinges on whether or not I can comfortably get like other people to play the mod or whatever to boot it up and stuff. So I don't know what needs to be done. I guess it also hinges on whether or not there's interest in it, obviously, but I also don't have too many. Like, that's just another time sink in a way. So you gotta be careful about that stuff. Well, like I just said, there's no single player aspect to them. So unless we get into, we would have to develop some sort of system, sort of like how people can use the HYDRA game state for their Mapcraps. We would have to develop some sort of system that works for that. In the context of like trying to facilitate single player content development. I think maybe like a Quake or Doom map or something would be easier for that sort of thing anyway. So. Yeah, I don't actually mind. I don't mind making more tutorials and stuff. I actually don't know what people would be looking for, though. Like, I don't know what would be the most useful for people. Well, I don't think that would be particularly useful for most people because most people who actually want to work within GPTP already do. It's not really that much of a learning curve, but it also requires programming knowledge. So, like, what are you gonna do? Like, either you're gonna do it or you're not gonna do it. Ah! I've launched Adobe Premiere Pro. I feel like that's pretty standard fare in programming now. Null checks crashing the game or crashing the program or whatever if they return null and there's an expectation for something else. Maybe that's just my bias of, or my ignorance talking, but maybe null checks don't normally crash games. I don't actually know. Yeah, I think for most people who are just starting out, the tutorial stuff for making what do you call it? I don't know why it does that. But the tutorials for essentially like getting started within the stuff would probably be the best approach if I had to guess. And so I can talk a bit about like the process of learning and that sort of thing. And how to start like conceptualizing map design and whatnot. Yeah, he's not talking about making maps for HYDRA though. He's just talking about making maps and like starting from not really knowing how the editor works. Maybe people, I don't know if Adam falls into this camp, but there's definitely people who are potentially interested in making maps, but don't really know where to start and don't necessarily have a grasp on what makes a good RTS map, what makes a functional RTS map, what things to keep in mind. And so, like, I guess the main issue, right, is like if I'm gonna start writing down some tutorial ideas, right, then I'm gonna say something like, introduction to map editing with HYDRA 2.0, and then this could have something like small tips to improve workflow. So like gimmick stuff, shortcuts, etc. So that would be stuff like using control left click to change your terrain brush type, and using control left click on a half tile to create a half brush. So like stuff that's basically very specific to SCM draft. And then like also going into the tile set index and using control left click to navigate to that part of the index. And maybe like I can just show people how I set up my stuff and how I make use of a second monitor with SCM draft when painting tiles. So that would be like basic shit, like a walkthrough of like essentially how to use SCM draft, and then like edit an example map to improve, say, pathing, map connectivity, etc. And we could probably edit like a campaign mission from the original campaigns, and then configuring a new map to be to run AI and be playable in single player. So for something like that, I might like wipe all the forces and triggers from the map and just have, and essentially like set it up in the middle of the tutorial. So that way we have like both editing an example map very briefly to show how like that's done, and then also like you have steps to configure a new map or something like that. I just said what gimmick stuff is. It's like essentially stuff that is not tutorialized anywhere, like control left clicking and the half brush painting. Right? Like this stuff isn't documented anywhere as far as I know. Adam, I haven't used StarEdit in literally 10 plus years, so I have no idea what StarEdit's features are. Like, I know some of the things that SCM Draft allows compared to StarEdit, like accessing different AI scripts or whatever, but I have no fucking memory of StarEdit itself as a tool, because I haven't used it in that long. So I would not be able to actually tell people. I wouldn't be able to. I would have to do actual research, and I would have to, like, I'll put it to you this way. I haven't used StarEdit in so long that if you boot up the game and then you click Campaign Editor, it still asks me to read the end user license agreement. I've literally never started it up on this computer. So I have no fucking idea. I don't know what you mean by non-melee map, but yeah, of course it's possible. The thing is, like, if you have an AI that starts out with stuff, then you have to have maybe a 2v1 or maybe a free for all, and maybe defender's advantage, maybe terrain advantage. There's other things that can equal the that can equalize certain aspects of a seemingly uneven battlefield. I think terrain is a huge one. Rush distance being large or small. Defender's advantage being high or low, depending on which player you're talking about. There's all sorts of stuff that can differentiate players and maps that I don't think you ever need to pre-place things. But if you were to pre-place stuff, there's ways to do it in a way that won't result in essentially utter death, or the death of gameplay, or making the AI be stupid so that it doesn't use its pre-placed advantages, right? Which is like I think the main concern for a lot of people who have been crow-pilled. There's so many different ways to do it. As far as triggers go, though, I don't really make triggers because I have no need for them very often. I just write AI, which is obviously modding. It's a completely different thing, so you need completely different setups for that. But I guess people would need to actually request specific things about triggers that they would want to learn about. What do you mean by the Cullen type of maps? If you're talking about actually having a like MOBA gameplay, I think we didn't go too far with it, so we don't really know what the end result is. Initial tests were pretty promising. I thought it was pretty fun, but we don't know. So, and that is literally in a league of its own. There's never been a map that's been made before or since that it comes close to the kind of gameplay you get out of that map. So it's literally the one map that exists. There are no other maps like it. Everything else is just like a weird gimmick fest. Nothing else is remotely consistent. Even that map is not necessarily great. Like it has weird shit going on for progression, and it was very much rushed, and obviously it has like crashes and stuff, so it's not even stable. So it's not even playable. But there's nothing like it. So there's nothing to compare it to. There's nothing to say how good it is or whatever. Yeah, I even have like certain what would you call them? Like chosen champions for those guys too. So well, I already have a primer on AI that you can go watch if you're interested. It tells you how to set up campaign AI without even needing to mod. Just how to use the different AI scripts and how to set them up in triggers and all that. Now, if you go watch that and you're still confused about something, or you want some further documentation, or you want some other thing, like something else, I'm down to revisit it. But well, if you're saying that you just don't have specific ideas, I would say like go through the like if you go to well, I don't have my browser open. Hold on. So if you go to pronogo.wikidot.com, there's a whole section where it says video tutorials, which links you to a YouTube playlist on my channel. There's modding and mapping starter guide. There's miscellaneous notes. I would say like look through this information, and like not all of it's complete. Like I don't have design principles, for example, written in the mapping starter guide, but I have like initial setup. I have some some basic philosophy stuff. I've got a walkthrough for setting up using the HYDRA game state in SEM draft so that you can pre-play certain units or access certain things. And then, there's like some other shit in here that's like basically just trivia. I've got like a step-by-step guide on how to create a custom unit using modding. It's like I would say like look at some of that stuff at your own pace or whatever. I'll definitely do I know that there's nothing like this on my channel already. This first idea for an introduction to editing with SEM draft. There's like one video I made a while ago that was supposed to be like that, but it doesn't really talk about like it was very specific about certain ideas instead of being more general. So I know that there's nothing like this, and as a result, I will be making this video at some point. But before you necessarily request other tutorials, or like I mean, you can request more stuff, but to reduce the risk of you requesting something that has already been done, I would suggest going back and watching at least some of those tutorials, or at least looking like skimming through them, maybe seeing what's already been done, and then seeing like what might still be whether there might be a gap in the tutorials that I already have, right? But there is documentation that I've made in the past. Some of it's like remastered specific, which obviously I don't even know if it's accurate anymore. I might end up just taking those videos down because I don't know if they're accurate or not. I guess at least if I get word that they are inaccurate, I'll probably take them down, like unlist them or something. But I think as of right now, they're actually the only. They might be the only videos on modding in remastered that exist. Pretty much nobody has tutorial content for that sort of thing. Yeah, well, I think even the beginner tutorial was probably a little too specific instead of being more like, yeah, I guess vague would probably be the best term to describe what, or not vague, general, broad. Those would be terms that I think would be adequate descriptors for an ideal first, beginner's guide or whatever. So. Yeah, if you have any, if you end up having any feedback, let me know. watching some Counter-Strike highlights from a recent pro match. That's actually still going on right now. What a fucking disaster. Alright. We're jumping back in. I actually should probably take a break at some point soon, but we'll see. So I was thinking another resource area could be up north over here. Let's bring that over. Make that happen. Okay. At this point, I don't even bother trying to fix these anyway, but manually. Just not worth it. All right, so we got another base over there. I'm thinking we could probably add one over here, but I think this is actually valuable negative space. And so what I might do is have a low ground base over here, or maybe a high ground base like maybe over here. Just grab this. All right. I'll see you later on, man. Thanks for hanging out. And for sure, don't be a stranger. Always nice to have you in here. And I'll do my best to get you some more of that that content that might help you out in your custom content adventures, as it were. So yeah, my thought process is base around here will be a natural expansion, probably for the player. We might even have it separated by a bit of terrain cover. I try to do this anyway when I'm making maps nowadays, but especially for the player, because their race is user select. They can pick whatever race they want. I want to make sure that the base is somewhat neutral in terms of balance. I've tried to do that for all parts of the map, even though I know that some areas are going to have a fixed race for a particular player. Like this is going to be a Terran player, as an example. And because of that, in theory, I could make some things that are like more suitable for Terran than they are for Zerg. But in this particular case, I think it's really important that I try to make things somewhat advantageous for all involved. And like it's possible to exploit from multiple different angles, right? Decent amount of versatility. Like over here, I've got 3 bases on the mainland for this player. Maybe that's because it's a Zerg player. Maybe I would have only put 2 if it was another race. That's a case where maybe I favored one part of it, or was like giving into that sort of temptation to make multiple races or whatever. But elsewhere, I think like this is a pretty neutral area. I think if a Zerg spawned in where the Protoss are, they'd be able to, take that south base first, or go for an aggressive push into the enemy territory over here. This would probably be somewhat ill-advised. Or they could take that base as well. They've got multiple positions they could take. They could take this northern one. I think that's probably fine. I think Zerg would do fine over here as well. And I think all races are pretty well balanced, well represented in terms of the strategies that they can employ, given the opportunity. So. Yeah, now I remember why I didn't make too many maps in this tile set. There's a different shading going on over there, which is pretty embarrassing. I'll have to fix that at some point. Now, luckily enough, we do have high compound on dirt, so I could use that if I wanted to have something a bit more consistent. Which I might just have to do, given the situation there. I'm trying to offer a little bit of essentially like turret room. You can place some static defense behind or around the resources if necessary. Something that I think some of my maps have historically lacked. I don't even know how that's possible, but that's okay because that's not going to be there forever. All right. It looks like actually the only thing that's fucked up are the cliffs. Maybe I just didn't prep them yet or something. Interesting. Alright, well, let's just leave that for now, I guess. I am at a bit of a loss as to how to structure the middle here for 2 players. I think one of them facing top left, and the other facing bottom right is probably fine. So like this one being a bit further down over here, basically. Trying to leave this area open for turret room and also to put like siege tanks or whatever the fuck over in that position, which would be pretty funny. Alright, I think I'm done being bipolar about that shit. I can block out an area for additional cliffs. Nice. IMO. I think this will mostly just be negative space. Question is, what is the natural for this player? I guess it's down here, but that's pretty close to this Protoss territory, right? So we gotta be kind of careful about that. I don't think that the availability of negative space is such that we would be able to send off an expansion anytime other than that. I think maybe I'll actually put the first player down here, actually. Though I admit the main reason for that is because without like prescribing I don't want to write really heavy amounts of custom AI for this. So without prescribing an expansion, the default AI would never take this because of our limited AI stuff. So. my hope is that I can get all of the layout finalized today, and then jump into like I can write the script and get the voice acting taken care of and the triggers for the dialogue and stuff like that. I hope I can get all of that done on the last day, Monday, and maybe Tuesday morning. I think that would be ideal. Because I've got so much shit planned on Monday anyway, so I don't even know if I'll be able to do much work on it. For now, we do need to start working on placing these cliffs, so... I think that's it, actually. Yeah, that should be good. I just also need to jump down here and grab the cliff doodads again. Slap one of them right there. Just got a block line of sight, roughly speaking, from over between those two areas so that your minerals can't get griefed or whatever. In fact, they might still be able to get griefed. I don't actually know. But I'm doing my best over here to make sure that doesn't happen. The other concern, obviously, is making, like, I don't want to be too restrictive on pathfinding, so... Yeah, this might actually just need to be expanded outward or whatever to stop that, but we'll see what happens. I don't think there will be much testing for this shit, but, you know. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, there's heavy emphasis on negative space where you can implement it. I think it's a super important aspect of maps, one that doesn't get a lot of credit in this sort of environment. One that I think I've ignored as well in general. What the fuck? That is something completely different, I'm afraid. Is it this? Okay, well. No idea then. Classic. What's up, Bailethal? How you doing? Nice. That looks like a bug with my own tile, which is pretty embarrassing, but whatever. This is all placeholder level shit, so I'm not that worried about it, even though it's triggering in the moment. Well, in this case, it's difficult to know offhand because I'm working with super old and low quality blends, like tile edits. Like they don't even match the center tiles. So like the cliff doodads match, right? And then the center tiles and the cliff doodad tile are different shades than what the cliff tiles are. So the whole thing is just like a confusing mess right now. But I'll get there eventually. And I should be able to replace a lot of the same stuff either way. Like the same tile, the same parts of the lookup table or whatever you want to call that shit. In theory, can be leveraged here. As soon as I started working with these today, I remembered why I didn't never wanted to work on desert maps. It's because I still hadn't done this yet. But I'm not going to let it stop me here. I mean, obviously, it's just map crap anyway. But it's also something that I can fix relatively easily. Yeah. I think space feels pretty good too, though it's still somewhat limited. Ashworld is getting there as well. I still need to do a little bit more work on that tile set. Desert, Twilight, and Ice. I mean, Ice is pretty good. Desert and Twilight definitely need a lot of work, though. For a second, I thought I was forgetting one, but I remembered the other one is just Insulation, which obviously I think we can safely forget, to be honest. I think Ashworld is probably just not looked at. Underrated. It's actually much better than people would assume. What's up, Roman? I think when you open up the spellbook, you can like shift F2 or something. I forget, you know, that's such an old thing, right? I forget. It's been so long ago. But I think it had something to do with the function keys. And you might have been able to like shift F2 or F2, like press whatever the function key that you wanted to assign as a hotkey. I think you were able to do that in the spellbook itself, like when you moused over it or something. But I don't fully remember, to be honest with you. Hopefully that gets you towards the right area, though. It's too bad Patrick isn't here right now. That guy who's responsible, he's like the head developer of the Protectors. That guy would know. He pops his head in every now and then. All right, man. Good luck. I hope it works out, you know? I wish I had more time to play more RTS games other than Brood War. I mean, not too many of them are worth playing, I guess, but I usually have a good time with what do you call it? Battlecry and the Protectors and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think we're pretty much taken care of over here as far as the tile set is concerned, or the layout is concerned. Obviously, it would be nice to have more details. But I think this is a nice, high-quality Mapcrap map. As quality as Mapcrap maps get. Yeah, they are more of an RTS than Warcraft 3, that's for sure. Which is funny because they actually have a more involved hero system than Warcraft 3, and yet they still manage to be more of a RTS. Purely because you can do like large-scale armies and stuff. I'm kind of curious how well I would fare on the higher difficulties of that game now that I've improved as a general RTS player since I've been playing so much Starcraft. Like I've improved in terms of macro and all that. Could be an interesting thing to look into. Although I'm not sure if the enemies just cheat or something on the higher difficulty. I don't actually know what difficulty changes in that game. But I think the main thing that puts me off about the Battlecry games is the amount of RNG. That feels really bad. Like there's just mischance and fail chance on spells and on attacks, and there's critical hit chance, critical miss chance, like all sorts of weird shit that I'm not a fan of whatsoever when it comes to that. So I think those are where most of my sort of disagreements come from. Yeah. Cool. Well, I could understand it initially when people are still figuring out what some of the better approaches are. But, you know, after a certain point, you figure out a formula, or so you would think. Like, people would figure out, oh, this doesn't work very well for a game where player actions are supposed to matter. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, most people are like, I like RPGs because of the storytelling, instead of like playing the game, you know? Unfortunately. I mean, in some sense, to each their own, but surely there's ways to try a few other things out, no? Push the genre into new and exciting avenues. I think I'm not too crazy about this approach. I actually think I want to shape this a little differently. So if we move this as a starting point down here, we can do this. It's a bit cramped though. This might get a little dicey. The fuck? Where did I go? Okay. Apparently Hades is really good, especially for the price or whatever, but I haven't yeah, I've heard good things about that as well. But I'm not 100% sure. The problem is that some of the positive stuff that I've heard is literally like people basically saying things that are objectively false, like stuff about its graphics, but I guess that's a bit more commonplace as far as like people going nuts for stupid shit are concerned. But that has made me a bit dubious, even though it's like pretty common for people to overblow the significance of visual stuff. Yeah, it might be a game that I personally check out later on based on what I've heard. My main issue with games like that are that it's essentially gambling for a good game state or a good map state or whatever you want to call it to start out with. But as long as I feel like there's always something that I could do differently to improve or whatever, then it's obviously not as big of a deal. Yeah. Yeah, if I end up checking it out, I'll stream it, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, that's what I don't get about shit like that, you know? I don't see the allure. I guess it's gambling, like I was saying. That's pretty much it. From what I can tell. Something I learned within the last couple months is apparently the AI's built-in check for buildings, for placement check for buildings, is unit ID based instead of class based. So I think AI will more commonly fuck themselves with factory placement if the factories are not the default ones. So like a Grand Library or an Argosy or a Robotics Authority don't have the same safety checks or sanity checks for placement as the Gateway Robotics Facility, Stargate. For the air stuff, it doesn't matter as much, but that means that they can block off their own passageways and shit pretty frequently, I feel like. It's pretty annoying that Blizzard decided it was a good idea to just do it that way. I think that's why we've seen just in general, we've seen Protoss disproportionately have stupid base layouts, and I think a large portion of it is because they don't respect certain sanity checks. It's just speculation, ultimately, but it might have something to do with what's going on in the world of the AI. I wonder what happens if I put this back here. One hell of a fucking system. Yeah, I don't know why. I wish it wasn't so stupid. I wish I could at least change it. Fuck it. I don't care if it's stupid because of the developers or whatever. If I can modify stuff, then it's not as big of a deal. I wonder if I should add another ramp over here. I think it's probably fine for this to be like a longer corridor because you have ways to impact this part of the map from here. So there's still something to fight over. It's funny how analyzing CSGO maps has made me think a little bit differently about things like negative space and having impact on certain areas of the map without necessarily being able to move there. Because I've been thinking about ways to improve all these CSGO maps I'm analyzing. And I've also been thinking about some of the things that like the more like the higher quality in my viewpoint maps, what they do basically, and why they end up being more successful. And a lot of it comes down to giving the player agency to do things without necessarily allowing them to move there or move there by themselves. Maybe they need a boost or something. You know, essentially having impact from like a window position without necessarily being able to move there. So they have like line of sight on an enemy or something. Or if they move there, then they can't move back because they can jump, right? Obviously, that's something that's three-dimensional. So I think that some interesting determinations can be had there. So in that sense, I found it quite refreshing to be able to sort of look at Starcraft map design from a different perspective as a result. Yeah, I think instead there should be like, it would have to be a terrain feature more than a unit. I would say a certain kind of ramp that's very sheer, so you could drop down but not climb back up. And then maybe with that system in place, you could have a unit that is able to scale those areas. Um, like certain units might be able to climb up those sheer cliff faces. So some units can you treat them like normal ramps, and but for the most part, most units would not be able to do that. I think stuff like that could be really cool, given the opportunity. But yeah, I think that's a really exciting idea. Too bad Icor is not awake anymore. I'm sure he would love that idea himself. I think having new styles of terrain is like a unexplored idea. Most of the time, it's just a gimmick, right? But I think it could be explored in a way that could be really neat. Yeah, it needs to be like a feature that can be used in multiple places, basically. Which obviously, like to design something that is in essence a system is more challenging than designing like a one-off gimmick. So I know why it's not done more often, but like to design something that's a mechanic that has a place within a system, you know what I mean? Not particularly common. I do feel like hover units should have some sort of like maybe there could be like some shallow water or something like that that's or shallow terrain that's like half of a height level advantage, like raised jungle maybe or something like that, where you could have hover units ignore the cliffs there compared to other units which would have to walk around anyway. Or maybe it could be something a bit less potentially overpowered. Maybe it could be something like certain ramps require like slow units down as they approach or something, but hover units ignore this penalty or something like that. I don't know. Because I don't really know how hover units would be able to more easily climb up a sheer cliff face is my concern, right? Like your idea of hover units ignoring it or using it like both ways. My concern there is like it's not like it's turning like 90 degrees up and going up, you know what I mean? Like I don't know how it would do that. So I'm not really sure. I also was thinking though, like similar to how CS:GO has ladders, where you're not very accurate while you're running up the ladders, but you can do it to go straight up and down. Something like that could be kind of interesting for an RTS, where you have like a ladder type system where units can essentially like spend time climbing up it. So it's effectively the similar to what I was talking about, where you're slowing down the unit as it's climbing something, as it's going from one height level to another. That might be an interesting approach for some uh, like artificial areas, right? Like I guess some organic ones could be like vines or something, where you could be climbing. But I have a feeling like I guess it would probably be limited to infantry if we wanted to make it consistent, which wouldn't feel really good for gameplay though, because like I don't know how a tank climbs up a ladder. But something like that could be interesting. I think also we should have like elevator platforms or something that like you stand your units on and activate or something like that. Like maybe once it reaches capacity, it automatically activates. But if you have like smaller groups of units, you can just like activate it manually or something. I don't know. There could be all sorts of cool things that we could do in the new engine. Yeah, like tanks doesn't make sense climbing, obviously. Certain units without like hydralisks, I guess you could use they're climbing with their claws or something. I don't know. Dragoons though, what the fuck did they do? Maybe larger units or mechanical units or something just don't get to, and that's they need elevator platforms. I don't know, but it does feel a little odd to do it that way. Okay, cool. That was some lard level fucking randomizer. Holy moly. Okay. Yeah, I think this is pretty solid. I don't know how much more of this will be changed as time goes on. I guess one area we could do a bit better with over here is something like this. Surely. There we go. I like how some of the doodads in this tile set are more interesting from a design perspective than like a monster design perspective than some of the actual units in the game. Pretty embarrassing in my opinion. Like this thing looks like it has a 3 instead of a mouth that's like bilateral or whatever the fuck you would call the horizontal mouth with 3 lips. It looks like it has like a flower opener or something, you know. Looks way more epic in my opinion. Yeah, exactly. See? You know what's up. Man, I really do wish that fucking Sarlacc pit dude never existed. Because do you have any idea how many stupid campaign missions end up using this doodad as like something that just kills units that go near it? So infuriating. That's a case where it's like such a it doesn't provide you with any value. Just results in people using it to horrendous extents for horrible results. Yeah, that's pretty amazing too. I don't know why the fuck they decided for that one. I mean, not like I'm making much sense using any of these doodads, but it's what I have, so I figure fuck it, I'll throw it in there. See, just to use them. I don't have time to actually do an art pass for this map. I don't think a decor pass. I tell you what. There you go. I think that's it for my map, dude. My map development today. Oh yeah, I had Premiere running this whole time. Nice to welcome screen. Thank you, Premiere. A very functional program. Oh wait. Big brain over here. Ay, ay, ay. All right. So as far as the patch that's coming up pretty soon goes, I think we're in a pretty good spot to ship it before Fraud Night starts off in about an hour 15. So I'm looking forward to that. I think we'll be it'll be interesting to see some of the changes in action, like the new Wraith and stuff in a Fraud Night environment. And I guess after that, I'll continue revising the robotic units. I've already got some ideas for them, and yeah, see what happens. Yeah, I'll make sure that there's enough people to at least get a couple games going. At least get one like 3v3 AI game. So at least 3 of us will have to be around 4 before we kick things off, I think. But yeah, we'll go for a couple hours like we normally do, and we'll see where we go from there. But yeah, I think that's it. Today was pretty cool. Got a lot of work done. Certainly happy about that. And as always, made a little bit of progress conceptually with some HYDRA stuff. That map looks pretty good, I think, right now. So I'll go ahead and continue working on that on and off. Looking forward to finishing the, what do you call it? The Inconsummate Mega video. I still have 2 sections to do. I've got to record some stuff about the remakes and the attempts down the years to remake Inconsummate. Some ideas that I've had about those, and essentially the motivation and stuff. So that'll probably be like a 30-minute section right there. And then I've got another closing section that sort of wraps everything up, which I hope will not be too long, but we'll see. Right now, the video length is already pretty insane, though. We've got... I don't know how to check, like, global... Yeah, right now we're at 5 hours, 21 minutes. So we're probably going to crack 6 hours on this video when it's done. It'll just be one mega video, sorted into different categories, basically. So I don't expect people to take in the whole thing at once. I'll put it to you that way. I just didn't want to have like multiple different videos. I wanted just one large sort of encapsulation. Yeah. And it's all just me talking, so prepare. Prepare your brain. Anyway, I'm going to take a break, get some water, get some food, use the bathroom, shave my fucking face, get ready for HYDRA's patch and the Fraudcraft night that will ensue in about an hour. So I think that'll do it for today. Look forward to that Inconsummate video. Look forward to more content. And yeah, see you guys later.